Okay. Any questions from your discussion? Or was everything clear? It's interesting. I know the Lama who's here these days, he's coming to come and teach tomorrow morning. And he's going to teach on another day too. When I first studied with him, all the, the philosophy and stuff, he said, I said, they all say this, variations of it, but he said something like, 25% of what you get from this, from anything I suppose, but from this is from listening. The rest is from what they call debate and from thinking about it and working on it yourself. Which kind of makes sense, you go to the class and you think about it, but you've got to go home and do your actual work, on your cooking or whatever it is. And so, this is why this discussion is actually quite beneficial, because it forces it to become your own, I know when I studied with him, and we used to do stuff 5 nights a week, we were quite intensive, hour-and-a-half class every evening. We would have discussion every day, and I know if I missed one, you'd feel like you'd missed the whole thing, So really it's so important to do this, because then you begin to get some kind of clarity. And then, of course, and the thinking about it yourself every day, it makes it your own. So were there any questions that you brought up from the discussions? Yes.
We talked about a question for a little bit related to continuity of mind.
Yes.
After reincarnation or the course of reincarnation. Mm-hmm. And I posited the idea that, I live a horrible life, and I do terrible things, and in fact, I end up being reincarnated as an ant. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering at that point if the mind is a river of mental moments, what is the ant a completely different set of mental moments, and what about the issue of propensities?
Sure.
Does that ant have my propensities?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So, okay, if you can just think of the mind, the continuity as being the same. But if you can think of it as having billions of seeds in it, and then at the time of, well, in this case here you are a human, at the time of your past death, in that life, let's say you were a human and you had let's say you had a 60-year long life. Well, clearly, all the things that you did then, they would have sort of been every single moment would be leaving a seed in your mind. But it would be the main propensities. And let's say in that life we have to deduce that you practice morality, probably even practice a spiritual path. Well, that was the main one. That one lot of seeds was what ripened, just to give you this one human life. So along with that human life comes a personality that sort of suits this human life, which is, because it's, reasonable kindness and reasonable goodness and reasonable wish to want to be beneficial to others. And, you can have other ones. Look at Hitler, for example. Look at people who do really kind of terrible, terrible things. So in general, you can say a few imprints, just a few, really. If you think about endless past lives, then just a few have ripened in this life. The rest are all there, latent. Billions upon billions upon billions of them are all sitting there latent. You've got the karmic imprints in your mind now to be like monsters, to be terrible, but they haven't ripened. So one of the jobs is to... one of the jobs in relation to karma is to purify, to pull out the karmic seeds that we have already planted that are sitting way deep down there before they ripen. So if you think of your mind as beginningless, so for it's a beginningless mind, beginningless lives, beginningless karmic imprints, trillions, countless trillions of seeds that haven't yet ripened. An awful lot have ripened, and you finish them. But what happens with karma is, like the punch, you've created the cause by having punched in the past. You get punched again, because you haven't cleaned it up and because you haven't changed your mind, you misinterpret it and you punch him back. And then you sow another seed, so you keep the ball rolling all the time. Now in the ant's case, it's more tragic, because what can an ant do? It's stuck with it. Even, like they say, a leopard can't change its spots, So this is why the Buddhist view would be, among all the different lives to have, and we've only just mentioned the animal one, but we're going to talk more, look into this, and just why it is suffering to have an animal birth, and why you'd rather avoid it if you could. And why, at least among these births that we're talking about, at least it's reasonable to get a human one, because you've got some choices. You've got some choices as a human. But the tragedy of the ant is the same situation for the ant. Countless past lives. countless karmic imprints, and very many good imprints there that would bring good results, like good human lives and so on and so forth. But the ant one ripened. So once you're down, then you lost the plot for quite a while. You know, there's nothing much you can do except act out the ant ones, and that gives you more of the same, and then you just keep, you know, you get killed. Doesn't last long for a little ant, you know. Then more karma ripens, then more karma ripens. You're just kind of lost in this nightmare a little bit, you know. But at least as a human, this is how they'd say, you know, the thing is, working on your mind now, having the ability to learn to be virtuous and positive and constructive with your body, speech and mind now, so you keep sowing decent seeds, and while you're at it, pull out the rubbish ones, you know. So really the essential aspects of practice from this point of view are to do the weeding and grow the flowers.
Say then that the ant has all the seeds that may be possible behavior, but because of the limit in its life, isn't able to ripen.
Let's use the, sorry, you should be using the mic, because it's a bit hard to hear, isn't it? So if we can, is it just able to be passed around? Yeah, good. Oh, okay. But just let's pass around the mic, because then for the recording it makes it easier for everyone to hear the question rather than just my answer. I forgot about that. Great, okay.
Sorry.
Good, that's okay.
Okay. So is it correct to say that the ant and other animals or other sentient beings that aren't human have all the seeds of all possible behaviors in their past, but because of the nature of their limited lives or aren't able to ripen the better seeds, and so just continue on and on? Unless they're raised up by a bodhisattva praying for them.
There you go, that's exactly right. So, okay, yeah, we've all got, just keep the mic there, it's okay for the moment. Keep it there. You see, the thing is, right now, the status is, whoever is, all the countless sentient beings that are existing right now, they've all got beginningless lives. Therefore, we've all got beginningless karmic imprints. We've all had a lot of lives. I mean, it all seems a bit insane because we don't think like this normally. It's a very different take on things. Got beginningless mind, beginningless lives. We've had beginningless karmic seeds planted and beginningless experiences, and beginningless more seeds continuing to be planted. So we can say that an awful lot of the karmic seeds for the ant and for us haven't ripened. And you could say, yes, we've got the karmic imprints there for every imaginable behavior, including we have the karma to be completely perfect, completely enlightened. We have all the good seeds there. So we can certainly say one of the advantages of being a human is, the very nature of the human rebirth is that you've got a few more options. Because of morality, morality is benefiting others, not harming others. So it's just in its nature, it ripens as good things. It ripens as intelligence. It ripens as peace. It ripens as kindness. You get my point? Mm-hmm. They're the obvious and they're the logical and natural result of morality. And so, as a human, we've got access to some of that part of ourselves. Aren't we fortunate? But nevertheless, look at the human world. It's a pretty disastrous place, and it's as if we haven't got much virtue. I mean, look at us doing maniac things. So even as humans, we can see it's kind of tough to even access the good seeds that we've already got and are able to see. It's just so difficult because it's just, well, there's lots of things, explanations there, whatever. But with an ant or a dog, a lion, or whatever, you know, bird, fish, insect,
Hungry ghost.
Hungry ghost, all these, I'll talk about these, yeah. That, you know, what has ripened makes it even much, it is, not even virtually, it is impossible for an ant to access its virtuous seeds. It's not, it hasn't got the capability. There's not that much intelligence. Even just look at the poor old dog, you know, your nice little doggy woggy whom you adore. As long as it's around you, it has a good life. You can be kind to it, you can allay its fears, you can feed it, look after it. But you watch, you know, even it hears a weird noise at night, its poor little eyes go berserk, its little mind goes paranoid, because it can't put two and two together. It doesn't know what it is. And you just know it's the next door neighbour, but they bark like crazy, this mind, you know, really fearful, really negative, really deluded, because that's the nature of an animal's mind, quite small. They've got cleverness in other ways, you know. So, okay, so that dog living with you, because you're a human, you're a nice person, and it hears virtuous things go into its mind. And the Buddhist view would be that everything that any sentient being experiences, sees or hears or smells or tastes or touches, leaves an imprint in their mind. So with this in mind, a dog that lives with you, hearing nice things and you being kind to it and you helping it not have to create negative karma all the time by helping it avoid killing, then it's at least not creating much negative karma. And so the way the Buddhist would be, because of the power of certain things, then, you know, like the power of enlightened beings and the power of prayer and the power of certain sounds, then, or even visual things, just anything that even a bird or a dog hears or sees that are to do with virtue, to do with spiritual practice, that would leave very strong imprints on its mind, and especially at the time of death, if it could have access to those types of imprints, that could be enough to nourish those seeds that are already in the dog's mind from past lives, to help them nourish and then get a decent birth next life. Mm-hmm. So every sentient being you meet, every ant you see, you know, every even a dead creatures, they would say, you know, saying mantras, for example, blowing on that ant that leaves some karmic impression. I mean, this is another discussion we'll talk about. So that's the only way to help sentient beings who've lost the plot, you know. We can even see with some humans. Look, I mean, some humans have so much mental suffering, born with really limited minds, can't do much to help themselves. So the best is to protect them and at least prevent them from doing much harm. And then also to try and put decent imprints in their minds, you know.
Okay.
Do you see?
Yes. Thank you.
That's how they talk. Well, a person who's, I mean, you can imagine a person who's got very low intelligence and can't work their own lives out. Well, they live on the street, they'd be pretty disastrous, wouldn't they? They'd probably end up killing and harming and being killed and being harmed. So you protect them by taking care of them, by looking after them. That's how one of the major ways we can help each other is by protecting each other, isn't it? Isn't it like a child, you know? So the other kinds of lives, any more questions? I'll talk about that in a minute. Any more questions that popped up for you? Yeah.
We were wondering about whether countries, you mentioned environmental karma. Do countries have karmas? We couldn't logic our way through that.
Yeah, I understand. Well, if you analyse what is a country, you know, it's just a piece of this earth on this planet. Leave it there just in case we have to talk. Oh. Okay. You know, you think of this country, we call it the United States, you know. It's a piece of earth that happens to be occupied by a bunch of people, humans in this, you know, humans and animals. So, yes, for sure. I mean, you can see some, as we call it, some countries are more beautiful, some are more suffering, some are hotter, some are colder, some are uglier, isn't it? Some pieces of this country, you can go to some areas where the water's pristine, the mountains are lovely, the air is clear, everything is pleasant and pleasing. Some places, even just, like I said, some neighbourhoods are just disgusting, you know. Some countries generally, I mean, you go to India, we do a pilgrimage every year, and we drive through certain parts of India. And everything you look at is just, I mean, the natural part of the world is fine, but it's just grotesque. It's ugly and dirty and stinky and poor and I mean, look at, yeah, you see. So countries, in the sense of the group of people who have the karma to live on that piece of earth, it is, yes, that's what has the karma, not the piece of land, the people who live there, isn't it? Yes. And you can see that can change. You know, a couple of 100 years ago, one area that was just really beautiful is now completely revolting, you know. So if you have the karma to live in that place 100 years ago, but some other people have the karma to live there now because it's now a horrible place. So it all keeps changing, doesn't it? Countries change, you know, politics change. So it's due to the karma of people.
So we were talking about the Iraq War and the soldiers who were there and contemplating the karma for them and remembering that you said motivation is part of what makes a karma heavier or less heavy.
And we'll talk about that.
So is there a karmic result? We talked about Bush. I'm wondering about the karmic result for him. But what about the karmic result for the country?
That's right, for the people.
Right.
Now, in other words, the term they use is collective karma. So this group, in this room, we're a group, right? So there's a whole bunch of us here, all these bunch of different minds. We've not ever been together in this one group in this life, and we probably won't be again unless we decide to have a reunion or something, you know? And then one of us will probably die or something, so it won't be the same, you see. So it's like, we can see we have a collective karma. It's not, it seems to us in the normal way of looking at the world, just this random people have come together. You know, it's all very nice, hi, how are you, and everything. But it's not random. There's no way. There's a strong connection that we have got from the past, from doing something exactly like this. Obviously, we're not talking about guns here. We're not talking about how to kill each other. We're talking about how to get better as human beings and be of benefit. So that's called spiritual practice. So we created the cause very strongly in the past, doing this kind of activity together in this particular group. So we are creating the cause to be put together again. A group of people called Americans, a group of people called Iraqis, a group of people called Tibetans, who are now suffering at the hands of another group of people called the Chinese. That's very strong group karma, yes, as a group. A family is a group. Women is a group. You know, the way we label white people, black people, there's group karma. There's a collective experience. Women can all share experiences and all agree on all sorts of things that we have as women. But, you know, if one is a scientist and one is a cook, you're not going to have much in common. But from the perspective of being women, we can all share experience. You see, that's a collective karma. So you could say, therefore, that generally speaking, you know, it can be different. Americans pay taxes that support the war. But if you really don't like war and don't support war and don't want to kill anybody and do not like, you know, and don't cheer when the Iraqis get killed and don't, you understand, then you're not creating the karma of killing, because even though you're part of the group and even your taxes are being used, your mind so clearly does not want that, and if you had the choice, your dollars wouldn't go towards guns, then you could say you're not creating that karma, even though you're called an American. Karma's not forced on you, it finally comes from your mind, you know. So another person who's not a soldier, let's say there's a person who really likes Bush. I mean, I'm not criticising anybody here, but looking. Let's say, forget Bush. Let's say a person really doesn't, you know, really agrees with the war. Not just, you know, our boys, but really is happy when the enemy suffers. It wouldn't be so much with Iraq, because Iraq hasn't directly harmed this country. But I remember during the Second World War, my mother, an incredibly, really intelligent, wonderful, compassionate human being, but she strongly had the karma of a lot of her generation who didn't like the Japanese, because the Japanese were the enemy in that area, in the Pacific. So she'd always talk about the Japs, you know. People who were in Europe didn't like the Germans. I mean, and the Americans didn't, you know, it's like, because that, if a country harms you, then it gives you a strong basis for wanting them to suffer. And so, you know, if an American really agrees with the war, then every time the Iraqis get harmed, they'll cheer, they'll be happy. They're sitting there having their breakfast. They haven't killed anybody, but they might as well have. Because what you do in your mind, rejoicing when someone else suffers, is almost worse than if you do it. It's like as if you're doing it. Equally, rejoicing in someone else's happiness is absolutely marvellous. You create very powerful, virtuous karma every time you praise somebody, or are kind to somebody, or delight when someone is happy. This is extraordinary. It's one of the most marvellous practices we can do that's so easy, just by not having negative thoughts and by purposely having positive thoughts. It's not just kind of being, you know, wishy-washy. It's very powerful. So what the mind does is how you, and then you can experience things collectively. I always think of, what was that guy's name who killed all those people in what's that kind of, old age, you forget things. Timothy McVeigh. Remember that? Or Oklahoma City, thank you. I remember reading that a whole bunch of Americans all had a party at midnight and cheered and drank champagne when he got executed. Now, they're sitting there just in their houses, you know, but you might as well have killed. You create the karma of killing. It's so heavy. Cheering, being happy that someone else is suffering, you know. And that's what we all do. Because if you harm me, I'm allowed to be happy when you get harmed. And in fact, I want you to get harmed. I want you to suffer. Because that's how, unfortunately, how the very strong anger works. It becomes this ill will and revenge, doesn't it? We can see in the world. It's so shocking. Does this answer the points?
Very well. Thank you.
Someone else? Okay, so let's continue on a couple of the themes just brought up with karma. Let's look at the different kinds of minds, the different kinds of semchens, the different kinds of sentient beings that Buddha would assert exist, okay? And we can hear from this, there's a lot of common agreement among cultures, among religions. So it seems to me to reinforce something that the experience is very similar. Maybe it's the way we interpret these things that is quite different, you know. I mean, you know, you would say that Christians don't use the term reincarnation, but if you understand the Buddhist view, you would say for sure they're saying reincarnation, because when you die and go to hell or heaven, that's reincarnation. Except that the Christians would say, you know, you didn't come from another one, God made you, and then when you die, you go here or you go there, you have this experience or that experience, and then it lasts forever. That's the Christian view. Well, Buddha has a similar view, but he calls it reincarnation, but he interprets it very differently. So, for example, the Buddhist approach would be, you've got these trillions upon countless trillions of minds, all of which are necessarily beginningless, because Buddha would say there's no such thing as a creator. Therefore, you know, they can't begin. You can't come out of nothing. It's a kind of a totally interesting idea, you know, because we're so used to believing things begin. Everything starts. There was nothing, and then there was nothing, and now there's something. This is very deep in our minds, including scientifically. But Buddha's asserting this is not possible if you assert the view of cause and effect. So then, with this in mind, then there are minds that exist, and there are countless of them, Buddha says, and it's not too difficult to prove that, even from among the ones we see. And those minds are all beginningless. And so given that karma is the law, the natural momentum, it's the law that propels minds into their experiences. There's no one up there, you see. This is the usual view of being judged and sent to heaven or sent to hell. And I know I'm saying it in a simplistic way. There's no concept like this in Buddhism. None. Karma is the power that propels our minds, and karma means the very things we think and do and say. So it's an internal motor of minds, you know, the engine that propels minds to go here or go there or think this or do that. And of course a mind is simply what propels this body, isn't it? The body doesn't have a life of its own. The mind propels it. My fist will stay in my lap unless my mind experiences anger and then has the wish to harm. Then it will come up and do something. My legs will stay here unless my mind decides I want to get up and walk out the door. So it's sort of obvious what's in your mind causes your body and speech to do what they do, you know. So the mind is what propels us, and then this power that propels the mind, and it's really a way of talking about how the mind works. It's not some separate thing from the mind. It's called karma, you know. So, okay, according to Buddha, you've got these limitless number of minds, semchens, sentient beings. You can divide them into two. You could say there's a whole bunch that are called, in Sanskrit, Arya. Arya, it means superior. Superior beings. Well, that's a familiar word. Christians use it, but they say there's one, and it's God. Buddhism would say there are countless beings who are labelled superior beings. So if you take it along the track of one's capability, then at a certain point in your practice, once you've depolluted your mind to a pretty incredible degree, you know, there's a very specific point. Once what they call it is, once you've finally got insight into how things do exist, once you've cut the root of delusion, once you've cut this root called ego grasping, and we can talk more about this, then from that moment, you've now left samsara. You kind of got out of samsara. You've still got more to go before you fully develop yourself to all the way to perfection, to Buddhahood, to enlightenment. If you're on the bodhisattva path, you've got a long way to go yet. But there's this crucial point, this crucial kind of turning point. So here you can divide all of those who have gotten to that point and are now moving towards their Buddhahood, and there's still different stages of internal development. They're all called superior beings. Then all of those who haven't yet got out of that are called sentient beings, they're all in samsara. They're suffering sentient beings. They're caught up in suffering still, to whatever degree. So now you can divide these into three, a group of three. And this is this is really very much based upon the Hindu teachings and the understanding of the way you meditate and the different levels of absorption, as they call it. But they talk about a certain level of beings who are called formless, meaning due to certain kinds of meditation, their mind has become so absorbed, their rebirth is just as almost like pure consciousness. No form, no gross form at all in any way. And they're just in this deep absorption. So it's kind of a useless type of rebirth. It's meaningless, it's useless. But it's the result of type of meditation. They call them formless beings. Then you've got some who are slightly subtler than that. That's all. A bit grosser, sorry. And they're called form beings. Then you've got what they call the desire realm. The formless realm, the form realm, and the desire realm. And then we're in that one. And that's divided into 6 realms. Divided into 6 realms. 6 types of sentient beings. And what defines each type, what defines the realms, is the mental capacity. And that comes along with a type of physicality. So this is an interesting discussion. From the point of view of Tantra, which is the advanced teachings, are very interesting and very, I think, very helpful, practical ways of describing matter and mind. Tantra really is, you can see a lot of similarity between all the teachings in the Hindu tradition of yoga, how they talk about the subtler physical energies, you know, they talk about the channels, the chakras, the kundalini, all this business. And you can look in Chinese medicine and you're going to find a similar type of system, you know, the, what do you call them? The meridians, all this stuff, the airs, you know. There's a lot of, you can see in different traditions. In the Indian tradition, the same. There's a lot of similar ways of describing energy, physical energy, at a subtler level. So Buddhism certainly has this. So from this tantric point of view, where they describe this physical energy at a subtler level, you can describe mind in a very simple little model. You've got gross level of our mental capacity, which is sensory and conceptual. Now that happens to be the level at which we function from day to day, and it happens to be the level that we posit as being the mind in the West, and we call it the brain. And day-to-day experience is called conceptual thinking and feelings and emotions and the sensory experiences. And that's what we think of as the mind in the West, isn't it? We know there are other experiences. People have all report in different cultures very strange experiences like leaving their bodies, and we all know we have dreams, and we all know there are people who seem to see the minds of others sometimes and see the past and see the future, but because it doesn't fit with our very rigid model of the brain and the nervous system, we don't know where to put it all, so we kind of leave it alone, you know. We don't give it much respect, isn't it, the Western models. But if you take all those experiences and you relate them to this model here, this one I'm discussing, the Buddhist one, then it's completely explainable. It fits very comfortably. So you've got the gross level of conceptuality, the gross level of mind, which is conceptual and sensory. And conceptual includes all your thoughts and feelings and emotions, all your day-to-day stuff, you know. So we know, don't we, there's what we call unconscious, what Jung calls subconscious. We know there's lots of stuff swirling down in there somewhere, isn't it? We know, and it pops up out of the blue sometimes and it scares the life out of us. But we don't know how to access it. But we know it's sort of not like ordinary day-to-day stuff. We understand this. But the Buddhist view, it fits very comfortably if you're, you know, positing past experiences. So we can talk about unconscious and having not remembered certain things that happened as a child, but you can sort of go back digging, and you'll find because that awful thing happened when you were 2, you stored all these memories, and that's why you have this fear now. We can see this kind of thing. Well, you know, you talk about unconscious. Buddha says it's beginningless lives of unconscious, stuff that's buried there, that is impacting upon how we think and feel today, you know. And the other thing, so then, okay, you've got the gross level, which is obviously the tip of the iceberg. And as I said, we can see conceptual awareness, conceptual mental experiences are very limited. I mean, we talk about how you can't remember a past life. How can it be true? Well, we don't remember most of when we were a child. But excuse me, as I pointed out, we don't remember most of today. And that was at 9:30 this morning. Forget about now, 4:30. If we had to sit down and account for every single second accurately of every thought and every action and every word just since today, this would be an impossible ask, wouldn't it? No one would expect it from you because we're so used to thinking and just assuming the mind is limited. You get my point here? But actually, Buddha would say it's a state of real kind of, talk about ignorance. We have got the capability of seeing past and future, he says. We've got the capability of having stunning memory, stunning clarity, stunning capacity to hold huge amounts of information and awareness and knowledge and access, so much of it. We have got this capacity. And that's where he would then assert there's a subtler level of consciousness. Subtle, they call it subtle consciousness. Now, all the dreams we have, it's the only time in our ordinary lives where we would access that level of consciousness, is when we have dreams. But look, it's the weirdest experiences, isn't it? We can't go there at will most of the time. We don't really know what's going on. We don't know how to interpret it. We don't know how to fit it together with the rest of our life. It's just this strange place we all go. But that's where the only time we do experience our subtle consciousness is when we dream. Or even you could say, if we have some intuitive feelings about people, we know what they're feeling, and we can be quite sensitive to each other, you could say we're sort of just accessing the outer edges, the grossest outer edges of our more subtle awareness. You can say it like this. It's just my way of saying it. But then you've got even more subtle, and they call it very subtle consciousness. So let me try and explain. Along with gross, subtle, very subtle consciousness comes a certain level always of physicality. And this is just an interesting way to look at the whole world now. This is coming from Tantra. And this is the same model they use for Tibetan medicine, which is similar to Chinese medicine, which is coming from this explanation of energy. That there is, there are two kinds of energy on this earth, using that word energy. There's no real equivalent in the Tibetan for that word, but we use that word loosely in the West. You've got physical energy and you have mental. You have minds and you have matter. So, and in the same way that you have gross consciousness, gross mind, you can also have gross matter. Have a look at it. The universe, the world, the trees, the moon, the stars, the rocks, this world we occupy, part of which is this body. And the way they break the components of this matter down, this is this, in this model, as we're familiar with from medieval, science, is into the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Earth, air, fire, and water. So the rocks, the fire, the water, this body, the leaf, are all the same nature of being made up of earth, air, fire, water. But obviously there's a propensity of water in the water and of earth in the rocks. Well, even this body, look at it, they say it's 90% water, It's sort of interesting. It looks awfully solid, doesn't it? But it's, so it's the four elements. And so Tibetan medicine is absolutely based on this concept of the four elements, and then the relationship of the mind and the impact of those four elements upon the mind, and then the impact of the mind upon the elements. So we've got gross body and gross mind. This is the one that we think is existing, and this is all we think is existing. And this is why, because we can't see anything more, we say it began at conception and it ends at birth. Well, this indeed does. You're right. It does. But there is a subtle level of mind and body, both before and after those experiences. This is the point. That's all. So subtle consciousness is also inextricably linked with a subtler physical energy. And these are all kind of seamlessly linked, This is the gross expression of our subtle. And so they talk about, this is again familiar for people who know yoga, a subtle nervous system. 72,000 subtle channels, they say, through which courses this subtle wind energy, or prana. They talk about it like this. And so Buddhist Tantra deals in depth with this type of, this approach. And this is what Tibetan medicine is discussing. So, you go to your Tibetan doctor and they'll feel your pulses, right? And they'll be able to, because of their skill, as we know from any decent Chinese doctor, the same, they'll know exactly what's going on at this subtle level inside you. It's a surprise to the Western medical system, because that's not the view they use, right? I remember reading a report of a Tibetan doctor who didn't speak any English, had never met these particular patients in a hospital, but was invited by a regular Western doctor to his cancer ward. I forget exactly what ward it was. And he spent probably an hour with different patients, feeling their pulses. That's it. Looking at them, looking at their tongue, maybe looking at their urine, feeling their pulses. And he came up with a complete life history of all these people's health. You had hurt your back when you were 7, you did this when you were 9. I mean, these Western doctors were astonished because that's not the method they use, you know, and they couldn't help but respect because all the information stored away in there. This is just according to that model, that's all. And so the Tibetan medical system is coming directly out of Tantra, and they base their way of diagnosing on what they feel the pulses. And they can feel that that the liver is, let's say, the liver, whatever they call it, messed up. So all of the different parts of your body are symptoms of different mental states, and can be the results of karma. Are the results of karma, not could be, are. So from killing in the past, one of the tracks of karma is your killing karma. Your morality karma ripened, you got a human birth. Your morality karma ripened, you got lots of good tendencies. You're a good person. But you just can't help killing the ants, you know. You understand? We can all see, we're like this. So there's a tendency in your mind to kill. In ants in your case, not people, you know, or even more than that, ants. So there's a karmic imprint there. Well, the karmic result, that tendency, you can't see that with your winds, but the karmic result of, say, killing in a past life, not the tendency to kill now, I'm talking about the result, the experience similar to the cause could be that you get sick all the time. You get sick. So the Tibetan doctor would, because they were usually monks, right? They're now mostly lay people, men and women, but they were usually male monks, right? So they, because it's so totally accepted among Buddhists, it's this holistic approach to life. You're doing your practices every day, you're doing your purification, you're trying to be a good person, you're doing your mantras and all the rest, and you go to the Tibetan doctor and he tells you you've got this sickness all the time. Well, then you know automatically, and the doctor knows this automatically and assumes it, that this is due to some killing karma. So they would ensure that you take your Tibetan medicine, which would help cure the physical part of you, but it's not enough. You've got to work on your mind. So you've got to purify your past negative karma. And we're going to talk about we'll do that at night. We'll do that practice, purification. By purifying your killing karma, by continuing to keep your vow to not kill, and by taking your Tibetan medicine, and by changing your mind, then you change your body. You heal. You get better. Doesn't always follow. The karma can be very strong. So Tibetan doctors, even without the mental approach, have success stories all the time. I remember we did a story in our magazine, our FPMT magazine, years ago. I interviewed a Tibetan doctor. They didn't keep any records of their patients in the old days, you know. And he would say, oh yes, there's this German patient who came and he had AIDS, and 6 months later he came back and he was better. And this MS, and this cancer, and all these things that we think of as incurable often, or as miraculous if you do cure them, you know. All the time, the success stories, just by using their herbs, and by understanding the subtler level of the physical energy. And again, we can see this too. You tried certain method, didn't work, and you go to your acupuncturist, it sorts it out, you know. So it's working at a subtler level, that's all I'm talking. So we have the subtler physical level that is inextricably linked and comes along with this subtler mental level. This is subtle channels, the subtle winds, the subtle energies of the body that in Buddhist terms aren't visible to the eye even, but they're there. So the experience of the subtle mind, as I said, the best we can do is if we experience it in dreams, if it's not much use to us. But we can access that level. And this is where concentration meditation comes in. Well, one learns this very sophisticated skill coming, it's ancient, it's from the Hindus, you know. They really had it mastered, where you can learn to completely cease the gross level of conceptuality and sensory consciousness, to the point where you're not just unconscious. We do that every night when we go to bed, but we become unconscious, don't we? We don't access anything. Occasionally the dream consciousness will manifest in these weirdo experiences, but we have no control over it. We can't go there, you know. Whereas a meditator who's got this skill, and it's a very marvelous skill, and one can learn to do it. It takes time, obviously. Can completely cease the gross level as if they were asleep, but they've accessed this subtle level at which level they're kind of wide awake, if you like, at a subtler level of awareness. So it's esoteric to us because it's not how we think of the mind, because we think of it as the brain and so on. It's not our experience. But this is what we can learn to do. And there's an enormous advantage to this, because the mind at this subtler level is unbelievably clear and sharp and infinitely capable to hold information and to work at that level in this job of trying to deconstruct all the rubbish in the mind, the misconceptions. But also simply has the capacity, because it's more refined, more subtle, and interestingly does not need to depend upon the gross body for its existence, which is why Buddha can posit past and future lives, and why people can have out-of-body experiences. It totally fits with the Buddhist explanation. It's unexplainable if you think your mind is the brain. Clearly your brain didn't suddenly rush up to the ceiling, did it? But it's a common experience in many cultures, this one of leaving the body, you know? And that totally fits with the Buddhist explanation of the mind, that it's the more subtle level of mind. And it's when you say a person's particularly vulnerable, or where you've gone to sleep, or having an operation, the mind, the gross level has ceased temporarily. The gross conceptuality has ceased, which is the part of your body, a part of your mind that does depend on the brain. That's the gross part. But, there is a level of awareness that's more subtle, more refined than this, that doesn't need the brain for its existence, doesn't need this body, which is how come we can leave it. This is the thing. So meditators are learning to access that level, which is super refined, super sharp, super clear, super capable. And it's a necessary level to get to in order to really do all the work that Buddha's talking about, to deconstruct all the nonsense in this mind of ours. So at that level of consciousness also, which is not gross, which is not conceptual, which is not sensory, it's so infinitely more powerful in its capacity for awareness. So it can see, using the word simply to see, not like eyes, but it can cognize phenomena that can't be cognized by the eyes, by the ears, by the conceptuality. And that is to say, the past and the future, and things in long distances. This is the capability of this subtle consciousness, which we can access through meditation. So clairvoyance, clear seeing, which we think is just some trippy thing that some people seem to randomly have, is something that you can work to achieve. It is achievable by everybody. It's just natural, because it's a function of the subtle consciousness, which we all possess. But we have to do the job of getting there. So, rather than the usual view, we think people who are clairvoyant, it's sort of a random kind of event. It seems to be a bit hit and miss every now and again. You don't know any methods of how to get it again. You don't know methods of how to improve it, because we just think of it as so esoteric. Well, Buddha says, you can achieve it. It's a natural state of your mind when you've accessed the more refined level. It's just natural that the mind can do that. This is the Buddha's deal. Then you have this very subtle consciousness, they call it, the subtlest level. And we virtually never access this. The greatest meditators maybe can get to that level. Except, of course, every time we go to sleep. Every time we faint. Every time we die. The mind just naturally throws off all the grosser levels and goes to the physical as well, and goes to the very subtle level. The subtlest level of our consciousness, beyond which it can't be subtler. And they call it, as I said, very subtle consciousness. They also call it clear light consciousness. They also call it, interestingly, indestructible consciousness. It's the subtlest level of your conscious being, beyond which it can't be subtler. And a simple way to talk about it is as the repository of all the karmic imprints. It's like the programming occurs there, is held there. Because when Robina dies, it's just a label, isn't it, for this bunch of parts. When the cup breaks, it held together for a while, and then eventually it fell apart. The microphone fell apart. Robina will fall apart. So the physical part, as we know, turns into this yucky, stinky stuff, and then joins the rest of the physical world, unless you burn it up. But the mind, the gross mind, which is the conceptual and the sensory, by the time you stop breathing, that's finished. Robina's gone. Finished. Ceased. You're not dead yet. Your mind has now accessed the subtle level. There's no sign of it, But lots of people who work with dying people say you can kind of feel the person still there. That's just a way, animals as well. That's a way of saying, you know. So why in Buddhist, among people who die, you try not to, there's various ways you you know, try to behave around people who are dying and who are dead. You don't touch the body for a couple of days, all sorts of things. We'll talk about this. So the very subtle consciousness, you know, it too is inextricably linked with a very subtle level of physicality. So there's the gross body, which then as it gets, you know, it kind of throws its, you know, it finishes, and then what's left is the subtle consciousness, the subtle physical energy, the channels, the winds, all this part. Then that ceases along with the subtle consciousness as you're dying, let's say, and it goes to the very subtle level, and then with that, and all the physical energy, other word, you can say, it subsumes right down to this subtle wind energy, subtle wind. And that is inextricably linked with the very subtle consciousness. They can never be separated. So there's, in Buddha's terms then, which is interesting, whenever there's mind, there's always matter. So the beginning of this universe, there is a certain point at which this universe began. Of course there is. In the same way there's a moment this microphone began and Robina began. But it came out of previous stuff. This is the point. Not the first Big Bang, you know. But we can, you know, in using this model, they would say there was this very subtle wind, the wind energy that just was there from previous universes, whatever. And then due to the karma, the collective karma of all of us, billions upon billions upon billions of humans who have lived on this planet and will continue to live as long as there is this planet, ripened slowly. And that was the power that just organically and naturally caused the wind energy to gradually grow into this universe, which is the karmic appearance of our karmic appearance. It's the karmic result of our collective actions. God didn't make it. Buddha didn't make it. It just didn't pop up from its own side, depending solely on its own physical laws. And indeed, there are physical laws. But the way Buddha's saying, you know, it's interesting. What gives life power, if you're a Christian, is God, isn't it? Without God, there is no life. There's nothing. Well, Buddha would say the power is called karma, and it's the power of minds. It's not a holy thing. The idea that we create our own reality is not something special and holy. The Christian view and the other ones, in Buddhist views, we've made it sort of holy. We've reified it. Buddha says we're all creating our own experiences all the time, including intensely suffering experiences. So creating is nothing kind of special. But it's not like a magic wand type creating. It's an organic, natural law. You do this and think that, you get that result. So, with this in mind then, we've got within this realms of existence, this desire realm, they say there are 6 different realms. And they're just different levels of, as I said, mental experience, each of which comes along with a certain type of physicality, depending on the karma that ripens. So the highest sort of suburbs, if you like, in desire realm is called the God realms. And it's a bit like the Christians' explanation and the Muslims' explanation of heaven, paradise. This is what I'm saying before. We can see across the board of cultures and religions there's a lot of common experience, common explanations of things, which indicates we've got similar experiences. But I think, as I said before, the interpretation of just what they are and where they come from, this is where the differences are. You know? So, the God realm, it's said to be karmically the result of a lot of morality. The experience mentally is extreme bliss, ecstasy, bliss. The physical energy, and this is the point, is super subtle, like light bodies. The subtle wind energies, due to the morality, let's say you're born as a human, and in the human life you're really good, you really benefit others, you're really kind, you're really moral, you don't harm, but it's not particularly practiced in the context of a spiritual path. It's just goodness, you know, lots of it. Then it will ripen as your consciousness manifesting in the extremely blissful kind of experiences, and the physical energy, because the physical energy and the mind are inextricably linked, you manifest as like light, super light body. And so it's a super blissful experience that lasts, they would say, for eons. They don't have a very good definition of an eon. It's just a very long time. Millions of years. So according to the Christian teachings, and just using this as a context, that's all, and indeed the Muslim teachings, that's the goal. That's the end result. That's it. And they say it lasts forever. Well, Buddha would argue that it's the result of a lot of virtue, yes, but it doesn't last. It will run out because you're still in samsara. There is still ignorance. This ego grasping is still in the mind. You haven't uprooted that yet. You've got the results, this enormous bliss and happiness of a lot of virtue, and it lasts a long time, but it eventually runs out because you haven't cut the root of samsara yet. Buddha would argue that. Nevertheless, within samsara, it's a super blissful life. But from the Buddha's perspective, it's not a very useful life because you're so blissed out. You don't realize you've still got subtle delusions in the mind, and you don't realize it will end, and then your negative karma will ripen again because you haven't finished all your karma. You think you have, but you haven't, he says. He says this, you know. And so you've got a couple of those levels, a couple of those realms they talk about. Then you've got the humans. Now, according to Buddha, we're not the only human realm. We're not the only human type of mind. Which doesn't mean when you fly to Mars you're going to find a bunch of humans. It's really like other dimensions is the only way. You can't sort of hop in a plane and go to heaven, you know. You can't hop in a plane and go to a God realm. It's a reality. But Buddha's view of reality is, you know, it's again a bit like the Christian concept here, but the way he explains it is different, you know. You've got these different levels of reality, different experiences. So then you know, the human realms, let's just talk about ours for now. We can see there's a lot of common experience. We can see there's one thing that does join us all is this humanity, you know, our being vaguely human with 2 arms and 2 legs and a nose and eyes in the right place, and that's about it, you know, isn't it? And we can see there's some common experiences. We can see there are an enormous lot of differences too, my goodness, between good humans and bad humans. You might as well say they're a different realm of existence, you know. But the human experience, the Buddha would say, is less happiness. It's much grosser. It's much shorter. There's not enough, you know, if you just quantify the amount of morality you need to create to get an ordinary human life or a God realm life, you need an awful lot more morality in the bank to get a God life, right? But the Buddhists would say that a human one is preferable because you're not so blissed out, you're not so in ecstasy that you can actually utilize your intelligence to realize that life's really a big drama, and you've got the ability to go beyond it. You've got the ability to practice. So they say it's preferable to get this less happy life, but you can. It's a good life because you've got some intelligence. One of the consequences of morality, as I said, is that you've got a mind that can put things together. Suffering is linked to ignorance. Ignorance is narrow-minded. The more ignorance, the less options, the more suffering. We can even see that at a human level. A person's got a very narrow mind. They're very, very fearful, aren't they? Very stupid, very ignorant views, and do a lot of harm to others. You can see it's very much connected to suffering. A person whose mind is more spacious, more reasonable, can see things from different perspectives, is more kind, more compassionate, more intelligent, in a real sense. Then you've got the animals. We can see them. We share this planet with an awful lot of them. But you know, you can see there's a pretty big number. I mean, you just can imagine the number of mosquitoes in one summer, you know, in here. I just remember watching one of those animal shows, and this big whale opened its mouth, and its first mouthful of breakfast, in went 40 million little fish. 40 million fish in one mouthful of breakfast. That clearly shows us a lot of fish, you know. There's one whale in one small part of the ocean, which is 2/3 of the world. One mouthful, 40 million. So you can just kind of do some numbers and you probably come up with countless trillions. I mean, it's hard to imagine how many fish. I know in the Buddhist texts they talk about how the vast majority of all the animal realm live in the depths of the ocean, in like miles of sludge, in the deepest of ignorance, stacked miles high on top of each other. And I remember reading in the New York Times science pages years ago about how we're now finding billions of species living in the depths of the ocean, miles down, where we never thought you could live because there's no oxygen. Miles just packed solid in miles of sludge. Something like that. It's kind of interesting. Billions of species. So we can deduce already there's an awful lot of minds. In the animal realm. They're the ones we can even see. Some of them. Then you've got the spirit realm, and that's even more occupied than the animals. And there's all kinds of spirits, and they talk a lot about the hungry ghosts, because they're pointing out there one of the main sufferings of the spirit realm is unbelievable grasping, unbelievable kind of attachment multiplied 1,000,000 times. You know, the main propensity of the suffering in the animal realms is this primordial ignorance, narrow-minded, therefore fearful, enormous suffering. And then we can see on the level of many animals, unbelievable attachment, unbelievable aggression. I mean, it's like a nightmare. You watch any of those animal shows with a different perspective, you just see it's like hell on earth. Harming and being harmed. They spend their lives in just primordial fear, harming and being harmed. It's the life of animals, you know. It's unbearable. So spirits, even more of them, they're disembodied. You can't see them. Some people can, you know, we know. Lots of people report seeing ghosts, knowing there's a spirit there. Spirits pervade the universe. I mean, we think there are creatures in here and humans, but they'll be absolutely pervaded by other kinds of beings as well, spirits, who live around, all kinds of spirits. Then you've got the hell realms. Now we know that's a very common experience. You know, Mr. Dante wrote all about it. And the Christians talk about it. And the other religions talk about it. And lots of different religions have different ways of describing other realms of existence, don't they? You know, when you saw that, you know, the movie The Gladiator, you know, Russell Crowe, that way of describing that afterlife, very different, wasn't it? You listen to the Australian Aborigines, it's a very sophisticated understanding, and you can't kind of get it, you know, the dream time they talk about. You look at American Indians, so many different ways, common experience of other realms of reality. So of course we in the Western materialist view dismiss any of that as just pure sort of nonsense and unintelligent, and we're so intelligent, we're going to find facts by using our microscopes. You know, what you can see is what exists, and that's it. So we can kind of see in all the cultures, every single culture has got their own kind of view of religion, if you like, spiritual, beyond the physical, you know. It's kind of interesting. So it's up to us to find out what the truth is, reality is. What is the correct way to interpret? Because they're all viewpoints. They're all viewpoints, aren't they? Viewpoints. You know, in one religion, it's a viewpoint that if you, like this new movie of Mel Gibson, his Apocalypto, you know, talking about the Mayans, wasn't it? There's a certain view, you know, they had a viewpoint that the gods, the existence of the gods depended upon humans being sacrificed regularly. So for them it's a good thing. But you take someone else's view and that's called bad. You take the Buddhist view, you know, it's considered negative. So everything's a viewpoint. Everything is an elaborate philosophical presentation, isn't it? And we've all got our own viewpoints. We've all got our own ism. We've all got a view of what we think is right and what is wrong, and if I do this I'll get that. Everybody's got their mind full of viewpoints. This is how Buddha's talking, but we can see it's true. So his deal is we've got to learn to get in touch with the viewpoint that is in sync with reality. And he says, of course you can. Reality is real. You can describe it. It's not just as if there's a view and we can all think what we like, which is how we do think. That's a mistake. That's naive. That's just meaningless. It's like saying we can all think, oh, I can think there are 7 cups there. I can do what I like. I'm allowed to think what I like, we'll say. Of course you are. But it won't help. It helps, doesn't it? This is why we're so brilliant in the West at doing things, because we've all got a very solid philosophy that works, and we've all learned it. We learn our numbers, you know. So we can get on beautifully. because we all have an agreement in that viewpoint. We all agree about numbers, so we can make brilliant microphones and amazing computers because we've really got it down and we're all in agreement. So we can manipulate those laws and make marvelous things. So we can talk about a reality. But what we want, what we want though, and we don't realize we want this, we want a concrete reality. So what Buddha's saying, which is kind of interesting, is there is reality. There is an objective truth about how things are. But it's a conventional thing. It's just by agreement. That's how things exist. There's no concrete reality, and he says that's our problem. We're wanting a reality that's self-existent, that's existing from its own side. But Buddha would say that there is a reality, but the reality is that things are existing interdependently. The reality is finally that everything is just by convention. You agree that that's one, so we all get along, and it works. We can make beautiful things. So everything's by agreement. That is how things exist, Buddha says. So there's ultimate reality and conventional reality. And we'll talk about that more. So you got your hells, okay? And the vast number of all sentient beings are having that experience, the most intense suffering. And the main intensity of the suffering there is just, it's the suffering of unbelievable harm, you know, being harmed. And it's the propensity of anger. So the main delusions we've got, the three main kind of deluded states of mind. The root one is this ignorance, that in a general sense just brings limited mind. Ignorance, stupid, can't put things together, which brings enormous fear. On the basis of this, attachment, and on the basis of that, aversion. These are the psychological states. And this psychology refers to all sentient beings, all these realms of existence. It's not just to humans. So they're all psychological states. But within that, they're real. We think sometimes that when it's just in the mind, this is how we are in the West, we say, oh, it's only in the mind, as if somehow that makes it not real. But it's the exact opposite for Buddha. For that reason, it is real. So the God realms is a particular state of consciousness that comes along with its own physicality. The human realm, the animals, the spirits, the hells, they're different states of mind that manifest as different propensities, that have a different kind of physical experience. So then it's kind of interesting that the hell experience is always defined in terms of fire, aren't they? Well, this is a fascinating point, actually. I think about this a lot in the last few years. You could say that wherever there are the elements, earth, air, fire, water, that's a conducive environment for minds to go there. So again, you take this saying in the Buddhism, there's not an atom of space where you won't find sentient beings. There is not an atom of space where there aren't, it's not packed with minds. This is an interesting story. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the teacher of this organisation, my teacher, he was in India one time in Delhi, and my friend Jane, who was his secretary at the time, she said he called her in, and he had a glass of chamomile tea. And he said, there's a hell being there. So Jane kind of, oh, Rinpoche, come on, it's just the chamomile tea, you know. He said, you didn't hear me. There's a hell being there. So, okay, she kind of accepts what he says. They proceed to do prayers and things for this hell being and the chamomile tea, right? So if you think about it from this point of view, that wherever there are the elements, and if you think of hells, how it's talked of in a general sense is to do with heat, isn't it? Well, you know, there's fire energy. So maybe due to karma, this is the point, sentient beings from having harmed, and you look at the energy of violent mind. We talk about it as heat. And you look at the elements in the body. When you're raging with anger, the blood is bursting. Everything is exploding. It's like a storm, a violent hot, isn't it? It's just the elements, isn't it? Well, look at that. And it's so fierce, and it's so raging. Well, karmically, somehow, that propensity, this is how they talk about karma, you know. The mind leaves that body, that propensity. will just run to that type of experience. That's called hell. I mean, I'm talking about it very abstractly, but kind of practically, actually. It helps me understand how there can be these different realms of existence, not just hear it as something superstitious and fearful, which is how we think about it. I find that very interesting to think about like that, you know. So you look at this body, it's a bunch of the elements, isn't it? Well, look, it's not surprising. Our minds are in it. We're not surprised by that, but because we're so used to it and we think that this is me, we don't analyse it. But your mind ran to a certain set of elements, didn't they? And they happen to be elements that, you know, if your body's fairly healthy, you can say things work nicely. And that means, and then you're living in this environment where it's reasonable, you know. You're not living on the streets where it's 20 below, everyday suffering. You might as well be in hell. Your body is warm. You can put warm clothes. You can put the fire on. You can put the cooling on. That's the result of a lot of morality, where you can adjust the external environment to make it fit nicely with what your body needs. Suffering is when you can't do that, isn't it? That's suffering. You know, it's interesting. What do they call it? I remember reading as a kid, I was fascinated by this, that there's a certain type of thing that happens. They call it, what is it? Spontaneous combustion. A person can just burst into flames. Now, talk about hell karma. That's really fascinating. That is an experience, the karma's so strong, you get hell right there. You don't even have to wait till you die. You see my point? It's fascinating. And there's no explanation for that. That's a bizarre phenomenon. But this is interesting. It's a karmic one. The karma ripened. All the seeds came together. Boom. Hell happened right there in your own body, you know. You disappeared. It's interesting. They talk about hungry ghost type of suffering, which is really kind of gross attachment. Well, you know, our whole propensity now for bulimia and bulimia and anorexia. I mean, one of my sisters, her own experience. I mean, we're talking a lot about it, and you read about it, and you hear it more and more. It's this, because attachment, you see, its main energy is this just complete dissatisfaction, gross dissatisfaction. Nothing is ever enough. So the bulimic one is the expression of that uncontrolled, isn't it? So my sister Janet would describe how she'd be when she would eat. And she's this little person, you know, quite small frame. It was impossible to imagine how much she would eat. 6 times a day, and then vomit it 6 times a day. Now that's a state of enormous dissatisfaction, isn't it? It's like bottomless pit. It's like the junkie mind. So people also have that, but don't do the vomiting part. They just get fat. You understand? And then the other way it is experienced as I am so revolting and I'm so fat and I'm so ugly and I never eat anything. It's all the same. They're all the same symptom. They're variations of the same theme. And the theme is this unbelievable suffering mind of just bottomless pit of dissatisfaction at the grossest level, you know. We've all got it. We can all see. We call it low self-esteem in our culture. His Holiness the Dalai Lama heard about it and he said, that's a mental illness. So it all manifests in various ways. It's the way they describe the suffering of the hungry ghost in terms of like thousands of years of that unbelievable frantic hunger and never finding satisfaction. I mean, to almost like a comical degree. You know. That's mind. That's suffering. That's attachment. The suffering of attachment. So all the realms are just different levels of mind. That's all. We can recognise the hungry ghost mind in the human life. We can recognise the hell mind in the human life. We can recognise them all. But, you know, these realms are, you know, not just analogies. They're not just sort of like analogies. Buddha would say there's this spectrum of possibilities of mental experiences. It's vast, you know. And every single one of these sentient beings at any given moment is continuously experiencing the fruits of their own past actions. Every one of us, all the time. So clearly, given that I don't want suffering, and using Buddha's explanation, I can hear the causes of it. So there's something hopeful there. It says, what can I do about it? So by learning the law of why there are plants in your garden and why there are weeds and herbs, that tells you, it gives you the tools to know how to change it, doesn't it? If you just think someone else did it and what can you do and you're a victim of it, then all you can do is be afraid and live in anger and fear and blame, isn't it? And feel hopeless. And look at us. It's the nature of ego. We feel hopeless. So no wonder we don't want to look at our minds. We feel like we're rubbing our nose in it because we don't think we can change because it's not my fault, it's all their fault. Look at the real suffering we have. You know, it's just paralyzing when we really are locked into that one, into the blame one. It's just absolutely terrifying. So if everything I am is the fruit mainly of my own past tendencies, my own past actions, then it's extremely hopeful because now I can change. Now it's up to me. So as I said, you can say in relation to the two main causes of suffering in the second noble truth, delusions and karma, there are two levels of practice. So the first one, the most immediate, is to watch our body and speech and mind in the response to the harm that ripens, or in response to the goodness. Because the response to the harm activates aversion and anger, and response to the good things happening activates attachment. So we have to work on our minds. Or at the very first level of practice, at least don't punch back. Control your body and speech. At least control your body and your speech, because that's what does harm to others. Body and speech is the interface between me and others, isn't it? So at least if I control my behaviour, just like my grandma used to tell me, then at least I won't harm others. And that means at least I won't put more negative seeds in my mind. I'm protecting myself. But that's not enough. We have to take care of the karmic seeds that are already there, planted in the past, that haven't yet ripened. We've got to get ahead of the game. It just makes sense. So, you know, in your garden you ensure you don't put more poison seeds in, and you realise you've got a plenty there already, you start pulling them out. So you don't plant more and you pull out the past ones. That's the approach to practice at this basic level. But already a pretty incredible level. If you can get yourself together at this level, you're a pretty amazing human being. You're really on the case. So let's talk about how you purify karma. No, actually, we're going to talk about that tonight. That's okay. Yeah. So let's talk more about how we create karma. It's very interesting, actually. Let's look at it more in depth. And this helps us really understand what it is that makes actions negative and positive. You know, if I'm a Christian, God is the source behind everything, isn't he? He's the energy behind the world. He's the light of the world. He makes the world work. He turns the light on and it all lives. When God stops, it all stops. I mean, when God stops it, it'll all stop, because God's the power behind the earth. That's the view. Okay, I'm not criticizing, just stating. So clearly then, God is the creator. That means God made morality. God made the laws, didn't he? So that means, very logically, being a good person means doing what God said. It fits. It's the philosophy. I said to a Catholic friend of mine years ago, what is a negative action? What do you define as a sin? He said, it's that which goes against the will of God. That's how you define it. Well, it's reasonable if you posit a creator. So as a Catholic priest actually in prison, actually in the sex unit in one of the prisons in Australia, talked to me. I asked him a question. He was very helpful. He said, there's a natural law. We all accept that's the first step, but there is a natural law about what's good and bad, and one needs to learn that as well. But the core thing is you don't do it because God said. Now, this is interesting, I think. You look at our lives, and I'm just speaking philosophically here. The Buddhist view of this view is that it's incorrect. And that we bring the same view, though, to the materialist view. Except we don't call it God, we call it mummy and daddy. It's the dualistic view of someone else making you, someone else running the laws, and then you having to do it because they said so. That's why we have guilt. Because we've got this internalized mummy and daddy in here, this internalized God that we use to criticize ourselves, you know? So we also in the world, the materialist world, think being a good person and a bad person is defined by the laws. It's mummy's laws, that, you know, the government laws, the state laws. There's always these laws, aren't there, that people lay down. You must not do this and you must do that. So then if we always we decide that if we're not seen doing it, we got away with it. Isn't it? In my life, as a kid, my philosophy was do anything until I was stopped. So the Buddhist view would be that's a bit of a childish view. In other words, something is bad because mummy said so. It's a bit simplistic, he says. It's not the real reason. Something is not, it's not enough to say that. It's like when you're a child and your mother tells you not to go near the fire, and you probably will say, why not? And she will probably say, because I say so. Now, it works as a kid, doesn't it? It prevents you from getting burned. But if you, at the age of, 65, still don't go near the fire because mummy said so, you'd be a bit thwarted emotionally, don't you think? You'd be a bit infantile, wouldn't you agree? And this is, look at us, we're all walking around like 3-year-olds still with mummy and daddy inside because we haven't extricated them, we haven't weaned ourselves, we haven't become our own person yet. You're hearing me, don't you? It's very interesting. I mean, one of our ex-prisoners recently came to visit us. He's a nice guy, very intelligent, studied Buddhism very hard in prison, really struggling to put his life together. And he was out of his mind with rage with his mother. He lives with his mum, who's been taking care of his son. And what I saw, and I'm not being mean about him, but just you see your own mind, what you saw was this 3-year-old. He's a fully grown man, but he was like a 3-year-old, ranting about his mother. Now, clearly, he's ranting about the internalized mother. He's ranting about the fantasy of what he thinks his mother is, and then he dumps it on his mother. It's his own view. He's 3 years old and he hasn't grown up yet. All his own fears and his own guilt, and he calls it his mother. But you could see it. He was like a child. It was shocking to see. And we're all like this when we get upset and angry and hurt and jealous and depressed. We're like this little little mouth and his little arms. I mean, this big fat body, I remember this guy, big guy, big tough guy covered in his tats. But there might as well have been a little baby there bursting into tears at mean mummy because he hasn't gone past that yet, Well, join the club, okay? But this is the view. This is what happens when we have this view of ignorance. This view, Buddha says, a view of ignorance and attachment and aversion. That's the story. That's how it works. So the Buddha would say, I mean, we can see it's obvious. Your mother can tell you when you're little that it's not good to go near the fire because she says, because that's good for you right then, it works. But you've got to grow up, remove mummy from your mind and realise that actually the real reason is because it'll burn you. And you thank your mother for her kindness, But we don't. All we do is blame. Our mother said, don't do this and don't do that. And because we haven't grown up yet, we still feel like a 3-year-old, But we should thank her for her kindness and pointing out that we shouldn't do this and shouldn't do that. But we get offended. What do you mean? Don't tell me what to do. I can do what I like, Same with religion. We just think of it as this thing that's kind of sent to squash us. God says do this. But we should be grateful. If someone says to you, if you smoke cigarettes, you're going to get cancer, you don't get all petulant. Don't you tell me what to do. I can do what I like. And then when you do get cancer, you just think it's God punishing you. They punished me. They told me I get cancer. Oh, they're punishing me. I mean, it's really superstitious, isn't it? You should thank a person for telling you that there are consequences to your negative actions. So when the Buddha says, if you do this, you'll get born as an animal. If you do this, it'll cause you to get born in the hell realms. We should be like thanking the person for telling us, oh, what a relief, now I know what not to do. But instead we get all upset and petulant and hurt and think it's this kind of fundamentalism, because that's our mind already, fundamentalist. We're already fundamentalist. So this is why the Buddhists would stress in saying, we've got to see what's real. It's either real or it's not that you'll get cancer, so check it out, don't be superstitious. It's either real or not that there's hell or this or that. We've got to check it out, don't be superstitious. So that's why it's not punishment or reward, it's what you do yourself. Cancer's not a punishment for smoking cigarettes, it's just the natural consequence. Hell is not punishment for killing, it's the natural consequence, Buddha says. It's an internalized psychological experience. It's something you create for yourself. As Lama Yeshe said, hell is not some place where the devil is waiting saying, ha ha, I'm waiting for Lama Yeshe, which is how we think about it, the dualistic view, the punishment mode. He says hell is the manifestation of the negative energy of those very sentient beings. Happiness, good health, just relative level, having a healthy body or a body that works nicely with your environment, that's the manifestation of your own virtue. Your mind being peaceful is the manifestation of your own virtue. Your mind being paranoid and deluded is the manifestation of your own delusions. We are all the creations of our own stuff. It's a very tasty idea, you know. Very mature. Demands we grow up. Demands we get rid of fear. Demands we get rid of attachment and aversion. So, okay, in order for any action we do to bring the fully ripened result, as they call it, let's say an action of killing, if all, you know, to ripen as a suffering rebirth, in fact as many suffering rebirths, one small seed brings many fruits. One small virtuous action can ripen as many powerful good experiences. One small negative action can ripen as many suffering experiences. Karma expands. You know, a tiny seed can bring millions of fruits. We know this. Energy expands, you know. So, in order for a simple action of killing, let's say, I always think of the ant on my kitchen sink. It's my example. In order for that action to leave a seed in your mind that eventually will ripen as suffering rebirth for you, there need to be 4 conditions in place when you do that action. And the crucial one, the meaning in fact of karma, is intention to do it. And you think about this and it's very logical. Intention is actually, the word intention is synonymous with the word karma, action. Intention is what? Is the mind engaging in the thought, I will kill the ant, isn't it? The mind engaging in the thought to do something, the intention to do it. We can see it's the motor that propels you to the door. I want to walk out the door. I want to kill the ant. I want to kiss you. I want to give him $20. That's what causes the body and the speech to come into action and carry out the wishes of the mind, isn't it? It's obvious. Trouble is, we're not aware of our intentions most of the time. That's why we, you know, don't even know what we're doing. But that's not the main one. Okay, first, just the 4 headings, intention. Then there has to be, of course, an actual living ant on your kitchen sink. So the object has to be there. Intention, object. The action, you have to pick up your hand, you know, and do it, or turn the tap on, you know, and watch the ant go down the sink. And then the 4th one is the result. So there's intention, object, action, result. And they say for it to be a complete action of killing, the ant must die before you. That's kind of odd, isn't it? It's interesting that it's a complete action when that happens. So let's now look at intention, because this is the crucial one. Look at anything we intend to do. Oh, I'm going to eat my lunch. I'm going to kill the ant. I'm going to walk out the door. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to do my emails. Think of it. Any simple thing, day-to-day actions that we decide to do, intentions. It's obvious if you analyse it, and we never do analyse it. There's a reason behind it, isn't there? There's a reason you want to do your emails. There's a reason you want to eat. There's a reason you want to walk out the door. There's a reason you want to kill the ant. Isn't there? Always. It's always there, isn't it? And it comes with the intention, doesn't it? And it seems so totally linked to the intention, you almost don't separate it. But that's called motivation. They use the term motivation. It just means the reason. Motivation. In other words, that motivation or reason you do something is actually now what gives the real character to the action, actually ends up being the main determining factor for whether that's a positive or a negative action. And we'll explain and you'll see it very clearly. Now, normally speaking in the world, we can see this, isn't it? Killing is considered bad. So from a Buddhist point of view, he agrees, and we don't have to analyse it at all. You don't have to analyse it too deeply to realise that killing harms others. It's sort of obvious, isn't it? And if you did your market research and checked up with the ant and with the dog and with the human, do you like being killed? That you kind of know the answer. So good enough reason not to kill, isn't it? That's a good enough reason. Good enough reason to say, as Buddha does, killing is wrong. It's a good enough reason. It's not wrong because Buddha said. It's wrong because other beings don't like it, because it harms them. You can say, objectively speaking, that's the simple reason not to kill. Very simple. Don't have to go anywhere further. Just hear that and then follow it. Good enough. That's amazing. And we can see it's true. But when we want to understand why killing is bad, it's not because it harms somebody, because you can feed a child a glass of milk with love in your heart, and milk feeds that child beautifully, but this other kid, you didn't realise that they'd die. So that, it's not necessarily a bad action. It's because of their particular karma they get harmed by it. But we can see with killing, we can see what makes it negative. From our side, negative from our side, not harmful to them. Killing isn't necessarily the only thing that harms a person. Drinking milk can harm a person. So it certainly can see it can harm a person, and that will be our reason not to do it. But the crucial point is to understand what it is that makes it a negative action. What causes it to be negative? Negative meaning you create a negative seed in your mind that ripens as suffering for you. That's what the meaning of negative is. It's not, okay, let's look at this and you'll understand what I'm saying. So why it is negative is because of the motivation. So why do most people kill? Well, it's either motivated by aversion, isn't it, anger, or attachment. People go fishing and go hunting, not because they don't like deer. Fishermen like fish, actually. They really like the water, they like the fish. Hunters like the deer. They don't do them out of aversion. They don't hate the deer. They kill the rats. We kill the rats out of aversion. We kill humans out of aversion. You don't just go human hunting because you really enjoy human company. Oh, let's go hunting today, You don't say that. You understand? So the main motivation for killing, and let's face it, the main one, which is what gives it this power, this huge aggression one, that's anger, isn't it? It's obvious. Aversion, in other words, is the main motivation behind the action called killing. Aversion. I don't like you. I don't like ants. They disturb my peace, And that comes from attachment. I want an antless sink, please. I don't want people harming my people, so I'm going to kill them. So aversion is the outcropping of attachment. As we said before, attachment's the bottom line from day-to-day life point of view. So you will harm the thing that disturbs your peace, that is not what you want. Well, that's where killing comes from. So we can see the motivation behind killing is aversion, anger, aversion. And obviously there are degrees of it, aren't there? Slight irritation when you see the ant, all the way to this raging that causes you to stab your mummy 27 times. You understand? Aversion is the motivation. So clearly that aversion is what gives the power to the killing, is the main thing that causes you to create negative karma. It isn't just the intention to kill. Because let's look at the example that shows that. What's your name? Carmi. Carmen. Okay. Carmen can have an ant on her kitchen sink, right? And she sees it. She intends to kill it. The ant is there. She does the action and the ant dies. But let's look at her motivation. She has compassion. She sees the ant is mangled. And this is a common response, to think that killing it will help it. That's another discussion as to whether the method she uses, whether or not it does help, and we'll talk about that. But we can see very clearly when we ask her, her motivation wasn't aversion. So what is her mind full of at that time? Kindness, compassion. Her heart's reaching out to the ant. This is a common experience, isn't it? Now, in my case, my motivation is aversion. Right? I intend to kill, motivated by strong aversion. The ant is there. I smash it, right? And the ant gets away. Let's say I miss it. Carmen, full of compassion, kills the ant and the ant dies. So you could say from the ant's point of view, her ant got the worst end of the stick, right? So from the point of view of the ants, her ant suffered and mine didn't. So my ant's a lucky ant. But from the point of view of creating negative or positive karma, I created negative karma and she created positive karma. Can you see? The person who gives the child milk full of love and wanting to help the child, she had no idea that would kill the child. The child suffered terribly. But the person who gave the milk, okay, they were ignorant, but they meant well. Their heart was pure. That overrides even the negative result. And I remember one Lama in Sydney, we were discussing this exact topic, and we were on the second floor. And we were sitting by the window and there was a pot plant. And he said, you could even argue, and they debate all these things all the time, right? You could knock that pot plant over, bonk somebody on the head and they die. You could argue you create no karma. So when you understand your point of view, what karma means is what's happening in your mind. Now you can have what's your name? Vivian has an ant on her kitchen sink, but she doesn't see it. She's talking to a kid. She's being compassionate and kind and cooking the dinner, you know. And then the ant is there. She turns the sink on, the tap on, the ant dies, and the ant's dead, you know. But she had no intention. Do you understand? Well, there's no karma. She didn't create karma at all, either kind, good or bad. She created good karma and the ant even died. My ant got away and I create heavy negative karma because my negative mind. So this is reinforcing the Buddha's point that everything comes down to the mind. And everything comes down to intention, and then even more than intention, it comes down to the motivation. It's really specific, you know. So this is why, you know, let's say you killed your ant and nobody else knew your motivation, and you're in a house of ant lovers. They'll hate you. They'll chuck you out the door. But you didn't create any negative karma, regardless of what they think. You understand? My ant got away, you know. So you see, this is really, really important to understand. This is really crucial, and it's very specific and very exact, and that's why you have to know your own mind. So, and this is why in certain actions that okay, killing we just must stop. You can't just say, oh, I'll change my motivation and I'll keep killing. That's not enough, you understand? You get my point? You can't do that. Best just to stop killing. But we have to keep eating, right? Now let's look at what motivates eating. We all know it's not aversion. You don't eat the thing you don't like, believe me. You eat the thing you run to like a magnet. It's called attachment, right? That gets overexcited. And food is a big one for all of us because we have to have it to sustain, but it feeds into one of our main attachments. And look, for most of us, food is one of the things we think about most. I mean, it's very rare to find a person who doesn't care about what food they eat, wouldn't you say? I think it's very unusual to find a person like that. And I know a couple of people. They just don't care. They don't think about it, and then they get reminded, they eat something, they're happy, you know. There's a Tibetan monk I know. It's very amazing. I'm amazed by that. For most of us, we're constantly thinking about the kind of food. Is it good? Is it bad? When will I have it? When will I won't have it? I'll have this kind. I'll have that kind. I can't have this one. Then you eat too much, I get too fat. Then you eat not enough, you get too thin. Then you think you are too... I mean, you get my point. We all know this one. It is just an unbelievable obsessive thing for us. Because why? Because we're totally attached to this body, which is the basis of this me, you know. This is our main object. Our self is our main object of attachment, basically. So food is a massive one. So given that we still do need to eat in order to survive, right? Actually, eventually you don't. When you're very advanced, you don't. But we're not there yet. So given that we do need to eat, we might as well do certain actions to redeem the action of eating and change it from being a negative action to a positive one. And that's that simple thing that we did of blessing the food. Thinking of the food differently and thinking of giving it to others. Now, Lama Zopa says just one kind thought is something so marvellous for that mind. Because if you look at the ordinary world, with respect to us in the ordinary world, you know, most people, we are mostly on autopilot, following our attachment, following our aversion, bad-mouthing the next-door neighbour, bad-mouthing the hubby. You understand? I mean, most people, the quality of life, it's not to be revered, you know. It looks pleasing enough. They've got nice gardens and nice houses, but criticising and bad-mouthing and always distressed and always just following the attachment and, you know, you understand. I mean, it's a bit depressing, really. There's not much effort to do anything good there. And not much effort to go against the wish to criticise your next-door neighbour and you end up not. That's very rare. So to even have a kind thought is so marvellous, you know. So then can you imagine if you just, instead of just following your autopilot feeling of just shoving the food in mindlessly or with super attachment, you just think in your own mind for a moment how it, you know, you can think about emptiness. more and more of that one. You can think, before you follow the impulse, and it's very hard to do that, especially if you're hungry or thirsty. It's really hard not to grab that coffee the second you get it when you're dying for it. It's really hard not to put it in the mouth. It's like we see little kids. It's impossible. We're like that still. But just to wait for a second and not look all holy doing your prayers, like you're a holy person. You're just in your own mind. You just, before you put it in, you're conscious. You think of it. There's oceans of food. You think if you could, you would offer it. Don't underestimate that. That's a thought. But it's unbelievable. You completely change that simple action of eating food by thinking that way first. It's a powerful way to practice, The same with any of your pleasurable experiences. Your sex, your music. We do it based on attachment. So don't you think of it as something you're giving to someone else, your pleasure, you're offering yourself to someone else. Want to make them happy. We all know it's a good thing to do. We all know you end up experiencing a better time anyway. If you put the food in mindlessly like a pig, just shove it in, due respect to pigs. You understand my point here? We all know you don't have such a good experience. You don't remember eating it. Well, the same with any good experience, special, very intense experiences like sexual pleasure. If you really do it strongly with no thought of the other person, you don't even get much pleasure, You're just like a vampire. So we can sort of see being more spacious, thinking in another way about it, increases the pleasure. And not just mindfulness when you eat. It's not enough. You've got to want to offer it to others. This is where the real power is. It's extraordinary to do this. So there's a way of continuing to do what is normally a negative action, but you can transform it by changing the way you think. In other words, changing your motivation. You could even think, I'm going to eat because I want to be healthy, because I want to be a benefit to others. That's a very powerful motivation. That's an amazing motivation. And you just say it. In the beginning, it's just empty words. But don't be depressed about that. You've got to start somewhere. You've got to, practice makes perfect. Eventually, that becomes your sincere motivation. It becomes automatic. We all know practice makes perfect. Certain actions you just have to stop. And that's why, at the very first level of practice, the main thing is first controlling your body and speech. So we can see, let's say you've got such strong attachment for a certain object, and the classic example will be something like, cigarettes or alcohol. It's a very powerful object. You can't compromise. You can't say, oh, I'll do it with a good motivation. You don't. It's just not enough. You've got to just say no. You understand? That's why you just say no. You cut the object. Best. Sometimes we have to do that. We can even see in some relationships where it's so intense, so much attachment, so much pain and jealousy and suffering, it's best just to back away from the person. It's too much for you. It's like being in a fire. So you've got to know your own capability. You've got to know your own capability. So this is where you can see in the West, for example, we understand attachment is suffering. We don't call it attachment, we call it addiction. So we only call it, in other words, in the West, we only call it suffering when it's very extreme. And secondly, when the object is very harmful. So we can have a person who's like a vampire when it comes to attachment to being loved by others, by being approved by others. It can be worse attachment than a person has for alcohol, from the point of view of the person's mind. But because it's a benign object, it seems almost good to have other people like you, doesn't it? We don't think of it as suffering at all. We only see the suffering in terms of extreme and when it's a very powerful object that can visibly destroy you, especially your body. We don't worry, we don't worry too much about the mind. You can have a person who is, really, have an incredible, like my sister, Janet. I didn't know for years that she was bulimic, and then she eventually, told us. And she looked really healthy. She wasn't damaging her body, not at the beginning, but she was damaging her mind every day. We all do. I'm not trying to say she's special, by constantly craving for food. The way we all crave, forget the bulimic even. If you're thinking about food all the time, manipulating to get it, and always getting the right one, and always thinking about it and worrying about it, you're constantly creating attachment. You're constantly harming your mind. Your body might look great. So we don't think that's a problem in the West. We think it's called being healthy. But it's called being attached. Which doesn't mean you don't care and then eat like a slob. But we don't look at the mind. We don't factor in the mind in the West. If it harms the body, then we call it suffering. Isn't it? Because we see the body. So we can see a person who's got a problem with food, they've only got a problem if they get fat. They get really obese, let's say. But if a person, some people can eat like a vampire but don't get fat. We all think they're so lucky, don't we? Oh, you're so lucky you don't get fat, you know. But they're harming their mind. You get my point? But we don't think about that. So we only see the harm if it harms the body, you know. We think a person who gets angry has a problem with anger, and it's true. And as a kid, I certainly knew that because I was always the one who had the anger. But I could tell the passive aggressives from 100 feet away. I could tell. I knew. I could see them. I knew they had aversion, but they manifested in this cute way, and I wanted to kill them even more, you know. Do you understand my point? They don't think they have a problem with anger. Many people who don't express anger don't even think there is anger in their mind. But if you analyse anger and you see that really it is simply aversion, means not liking something, finding it unpleasing, being irritated, frustrated, annoyed, all these little variations. They're all variations of aversion. But because you don't express it strongly, you don't think you have a problem. But it's in the mind all the time. And it's the constant dissatisfaction, always finding fault and always critical and always negative. It's kind of interesting. So we've got to look at the mind, always back to the mind. So of course someone like me would harm someone else with my body, and I'd harm myself by being angry. A person who doesn't get angry with others, at least you're not harming others, but you're harming yourself. Again, back to the mind, you know. Everything comes down to the mind. Which is why we must know it well. It is sort of so obvious, you know. So, generally speaking, intention and therefore motivation for the intention, that's the crucial piece. That's the piece that determines whether or not the thing that you do or say is positive or negative, meaning determines the seed you leave in your mind. The motivation. We've really got to know our minds well. We've got to be very precise, in other words, just like we are with microphones and recipes. We've got to have very precise knowledge of our minds, and then we change them. So let's look now, though, at the action of killing the ant with compassion. Veronica, what did you say, Veronica? Carmen, so sorry. Who's Veronica? No, you're... Vivian, my God, I'm so sorry. Okay, Vivian and Carmen. Okay, let's look at, this is a really important point, this one now. Look at Carmen's action. She sees the ant, she has compassion, she intends to kill it, she does kill it. So usually we think, well, that's enough. How kind Carmen was. She put the ant down, she put the dog down, she put your grandmother down, you know? Isn't it? We call it euthanasia. Give it a fancy name. So we get so confused with this. We don't know how to decide if it's good or bad. And that's what is so confusing, I think, in the West, because we all have a different basis for deciding. So I'm just saying, okay, from the Christian view, it's sort of straightforward. Good enough, you know. It's straightforward, but even then, it's not straightforward, because some people can say death row is good, and some people say abortion's good. Christians can say that. So it isn't even really a standard view, you know. But the Buddhist view, once you've got the Buddhist view about what consciousness is, and about intention, and about karmic consequences, then it's not a question of someone telling you, the local Buddhist priest telling you what's good or bad. You work it out for yourself. It's evident. No one's stating that you shouldn't do it. It's not as if the Dalai Lama puts down the law, which is how we think of religion. You work it out for yourself. This is a really helpful point. When you understand math, you think about this, it's logical. When you understand the rules of math, you think this. You don't have to go to your teacher every time. Oh, what's 1 and 7? Then you have another problem, 1 and 6. Oh, what's 1 and 6? You get my point here? Once you know the rules, you can work it out for yourself. Do you see? Okay, this is a more complex set of rules here, but like anything, once you become familiar with it, you can work out the answer yourself. So let's look at this. Look at it logically. We're talking two things here. We're talking benefiting the ant, and we're talking the karma Carmen creates. So we've looked briefly at this. We've looked at Carmen. We already can see, pretty simply, because her motivation was pure, then we can probably deduce that she created good karma. That's comfortable. But we never asked the other question. Well, I wonder if killing the ant did benefit the ant. We never asked that question. You get my point. We just think because you meant well, it was a good action. And if I didn't mean well, mine was a bad action based upon us, and that's okay. But we're not looking at the ant, actually. So how do you determine whether killing the ant was good? So clearly you've got to work out what you mean by a mind here. So if you're a materialist, if the materialist philosophy is correct, that is, that when the ant dies, there is nothing left, which is what the materialist view is, isn't it? When you die, there's nothing left. Now, from that point of view, if you really follow this through logically, but we don't like to because we have an instinctive revulsion for killing, for dying. We do have a deep sense that it is wrong. If it is really true, and if we can prove it's true, then, excuse me, the moment someone starts suffering, you should kill them. You're doing them the best service you can. It's a fact, isn't it? Can you agree? Can you see my point? If I am suffering, and then if you kill me and then I'll stop existing, you really have stopped my suffering, haven't you? Well, why would I continue living? What a funny idea. Please kill me. Euthanasia is a really helpful medical procedure, you know. It would be the best medical procedure. You'd solve a lot of problems. Well, it's what Mr. Hitler tried to do, wasn't it? Unfortunately, it gets a bit berserk, you know. But we instinctively don't like it. But that's the one that we're following when we kill the ant, when we kill our mother. But you have to, so if you have the Buddhist view, and let's say Buddha is correct in his assertion that the ant's mind will continue and take another birth based upon the karma that ripened in its mind at the time of its death. This is the point that Buddha's saying, and we'll go into the death process later. So if it is true that the ant's consciousness will leave its body when karma kills it, and based upon the karma that ripened in the ant's mind at the time karma killed it, that determines its future life, right? So if that is true, that would be the consequence for the ant, wouldn't it? So obviously we know in daily life you would never do an action that you didn't know the consequence of. Especially if you thought there could be a harmful consequence. You wouldn't do it, would you? You with me? You would not do it. You'd think that was irresponsible unless you can be certain of the consequence. Well, same here, you know, same here. If I can be certain that my old grandma, at this moment, because I've got clairvoyance, let's say I haven't, but let's say I have, and I see her mind, and I know it's the best for her to die now. You could say, you'd even, you know, it might still sound shocking, but you could say it's not wrong to kill her, because you're confident she'll get a better rebirth. You just say you really know that. Well, then it can only be a good action. I don't care what the law says. I don't care what anyone else thinks. You've really helped her mind. But because we don't factor in this possibility, it's hard for us to hear. So therefore, you making a decision to kill the ant because you think the ant's suffering will go, you've got no proof of that. It's a bit arrogant, isn't it? Your side still, because your compassion, you create good karma. But you didn't help the ant. It's very simple. You might have, but you don't know. It's a bit like I've got a headache, and you mean well. Oh, Robina, have a pill, please, please. But you forget which one is cyanide. You see my point here. If you don't know the consequences of that action, you'd rather have my headache. I'd rather have my headache, please, and so would you rather have my headache. You get my point? Very simple. Unless we know the consequences of an action, unless we are confident, and we understand this when it comes to the scientific world. Again, when it comes to the material world, we really get this. We're very intelligent. If you don't know if that's an egg or not, you won't put it in the cake. You really are cautious and careful. If you don't know if there's a car coming around the corner, you won't send your little kid across the road. I mean, we don't take risks. We're very cautious, you know? Because in other words, unless you know the consequences of an action, you won't do it. But when it comes to this kind of thing, because there's no common ground about what mind is and about reincarnation and about karma, then we're all over the place. We just follow our emotions. You know, we think if it feels good, it must be good, and that's good enough. But that's just really superstitious. It's really ignorant, isn't it? It's not logical, is it? So does this point make sense? Does it make sense? So, you know, you think, well, then who the hell's got clairvoyance? How am I supposed to help people? Come on, you know. But remember, Buddha says we can have it. And often the Buddha says we can't really begin to help people until you've got clairvoyance, which is a bit shocking. It's a bit of a high level of help. We never aim to that level of helping on earth, to have clairvoyance into people's minds. Now you know how to help them. But if you think about it, I mean, it's not too difficult. You know, there's your doctor. There's even say your Tibetan doctor. Well, that's like clairvoyance. It's pretty subtle knowledge they've got. They can just feel your body and they can tell you exactly what's going on. That's pretty fancy, isn't it? That's pretty intense. Well, why not the mind too? Come on. It's not impossible. Buddha would say it's perfectly reasonable to be able to see the mind. And as you develop your qualities, as you get rid of your own pollution, and as you literally purify your mind, you expand your mind. And consciousness has the capacity to see the minds of others. Then you're really qualified to help. It's like you're being a really good diagnostician now, isn't it? Not unreasonable. Interesting story from this point of view. Lama Yeshe, who was my main teacher, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, and they're the founders of this organisation that this centre's part of, and their main monastery was in Nepal, Courtin Monastery. And I remember one of my friends, Harry, who was a monk at the time, he was at Courtin Monastery helping one of the monks who was sick. He was sort of showing signs of being very kind of crazy and quite sick, and he found a doctor who could help him. And so Harry told Lama Yeshe. And Lama basically just said to Harry, well, just back off and leave it alone, in his words, whatever. And because Harry has confidence in Lama, he didn't ask the reason. He trusted Lama, so he did. Well, the monk died. Now, that could sound quite shocking, isn't it, if you hear that story? Oh, my God, who does Lama think he is? He just says, back away, don't give him a doctor, and he died. Well, Lama Lundrup, another Lama, who was the abbot of the monastery, told Harry, he told him what was going on. He said, well, you know, Lama Yeshe's clairvoyant. You've got to take this as a given for this story, okay? Otherwise, it's all insane. And he's quite a highly realised being, enormously compassionate, very wise, and could see the karma this monk had created in the past that now manifested as this illness. Okay, and he could also see, he said, Lama Lundrup said, that he could have got better. He would have got better, and he would have had a fine life. But this particular karma would not have been finished, and it was quite heavy. So next life would have been unbearable, even worse suffering, because the karma wasn't finished. Now, that's a very specific story, okay? And so it actually worked out that what happened was, Harry said, this monk went back to his family up in the mountains and became very calm, and kind of the illness finished, but he died, and he died very peacefully. Well, from Lama Yeshe's point of view, that was the most skillful and the most compassionate thing to do. He finished that karma completely, because everything that you experience is the fruit of an action. You cleaned it up, you finished it. He died a very blissful death, and he'd get blissful future life. Well, that's long-term compassion, isn't it? Quite shocking, but that's long-term compassion, based upon this view of continuity of consciousness. So the point is, if you don't know the consequences for your grandma or your aunt, you don't just go, oh, well, who knows, and let them suffer. You do your best within your capability. You know, if you're not a surgeon and you've got a person you're taking care of, you can only help them according to your skill. But if you were a surgeon, you can help them even better. But you can only do your best, can't you? You can only do your best according to your skill, according to your wisdom. So you protect the ant. You get it out of the way. You blow mantras on it. You try to protect it and allow it to die peacefully in its own way. The same with your grandma. Do your best. Alleviate her pain. Take care of her, help her mind calm down, you know. Unless, you know, it's not a moralistic thing that you either not allowed to intervene. Helping someone is intervention. But you've got to know how to help them. Anything is like that. You've got to have, kindness is one thing, but it's got to be imbued with intelligence. You've got to know what you're doing. In other words, as Lama Zopa often puts it, meaning well is not enough. You need wisdom. Compassion is not enough. You need wisdom. And like in ordinary daily life, we can see it very clearly. In your day-to-day actions, you need wisdom. So it's an interesting one to think about. And it seems to me, on this earth these days, you know, one of the options is, one of the common views is that if you die, you go to heaven or hell. Another option is that nothing happens, and another option is you take another rebirth. Well, I mean, there's such a lot of talk about it, and there seems to be these options. And, you know, the fact that they're put up as an option, you mightn't know the answer, but good enough, because if it could be this, then you better leave it alone. If it's possible a car might hit you, don't cross the road. Do you see my point? It might not happen. You haven't got the clairvoyance to see it, but be cautious until you're certain. That's reasonable, isn't it? Yeah. Time for dinner. So tonight we can do, I'll talk about how you purify karma, and I'll lead you through a meditation. We haven't mentioned that other meditation yet. That'll come. We'll do that tomorrow maybe. And then, but dinner's at 6, and then what time was the session meant to be? 7? I think 7:30 is enough. Don't need so much. It'd only be about an hour, the whole thing. Keep it short for the evening. I think 7:30 should do. Or is it an hour and a half too long to have dinner? No? What do you do when you finish your dinner? You just wander about and twiddle your thumbs? Oh, well, you might as well come in here then. Okay. Okay, good. And the place is nice and toasty, isn't it? You did a good job. Made a difference, the heater, didn't it? Keep it on as much as you can. Warm it up. And you come in early. What time is meditation? You've got to get up at 6 and turn it on. Turn it on full blast for a whole hour. It'll be warm and lovely. So, okay, so come at 7 then. Sure. 7. And we can chat more about karma and do this meditation. So things are going okay? People are content enough? Good. Okay. Yeah, sure. Questions?
Going back to whether something is...
Give her the mic, darling.
Yeah, going back to the question or trying to decide whether an action is good or bad.
Yep.
So is it correct to say that if the motivation is based on delusions, then it would be a bad
for you,
action?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what makes it bad. That's the determining factor. The motivation is the thing that causes it to be a negative or a positive karma for you.
But the motivation, the bad motivation or the wrong motivation would be one of a wrong view or based on delusions.
Delusion, attachment, aversion, anger, stupidity, ignorance, pride, aggression, jealousy, depression. I'm going to kill myself, I'm so ugly. That's a bad motivation, sorry. Wrong view, you know. Do you see? So that is what causes things to be negative, is these neurotic states of mind. That's the point, absolutely. Exactly. So any more questions before you go to dinner? Oh. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about if somebody in your life, you said specifically a relationship, or somebody has a lot of anger and they're full of delusions, and you said, did you say just to leave?
No, what I meant was more if, like in your relationship with alcohol, the object's too intense for you. Your delusions rise so strongly. The same with a person. I'm talking about you, oneself. If that person activates so strongly certain delusions in you that it makes you berserk, not blaming them, but realizing you can't handle it, then absolutely, of course, back away. Of course, protect you. The first level of practice is do whatever is to protect yourself, is to be cautious, to protect yourself from going berserk. But you know, when you're more advanced on the bodhisattva path, they'd rather live with a maniac than a nice person, because it's all grist for the mill for them, you know. They use it for their practice. Do you see? That's the point I meant. So it could include, yes, of course, a person who's very deluded and very heavy. But if you can handle it, and it can help you grow as a human being, well, stick around them, of course.
So if somebody's at a point where they're not at that level yet and they can't handle it per se,
of course.
but
Go on.
you want to get to that point and not necessarily leave the relationship with that person.
It's up to you. Everything is up to what you can do. It's up to your level of capability. If you can run a mile, you run a mile. It's not a question of good or bad. It's up to what you can do. But if you can't, you must stop at a half a mile. If you can keep living with that person and you are using it for your practice and you are not increasing your delusions but you're lessening them, and even though it's still suffering for you, but you see you're working with it, you see my point?
Absolutely.
Well, then it's great. Honey, child, go for it. If you keep running and you'll have a heart attack, you'd better stop. You have to know if you can handle it. If you carry a lump, a big load and it's going to break your back, you don't carry it. If you can, you've got to be the boss. You've got to know how much you can do. It's up to you. Do you see? Someone else? That's it? Okay. So just let me sing a little prayer if you want to. This page here, the last one. Sing a couple. Tibetan prayers, but they're just thoughts. Prayers are thoughts. And these dedication prayers are just reminding ourselves, really, saying to ourselves in our own mind, okay, I'm sitting here listening to these teachings, thinking about the meaning, sowed all these seeds in my mind, and so how marvellous, based upon our motivation at the beginning, which is, you know, I'm doing this so I can develop my qualities, so I can be a benefit to others. We now dedicate with this mind. We think, okay, may that exactly happen as we motivated. May all these seeds ripen as quickly as possible in the development of my marvellous potential. Why? So I can be a benefit to others. How fantastic. Just thinking like that. And the second little prayer is just expressing the wish that altruism, the compassion, grow and grow. Okay, just these two at the end. Not quite the end. On the left there, sorry. Gewadi nyududag lama sange drugyune drowa chikyang malupa dei sala Gapasho Jang chob sem chogrin poche ma kye panam ke gyochig kye panyam pa me payang gong ne gong du pagasho. All right, thanks so much. And your food, just think of it as empty. Think of it as having no inherent nature. Think it doesn't exist like it appears, this concrete mind seeing it this way, that way, this attachment, whatever. To think it doesn't, it's more spacious, get a feeling of space. And then imagine it in the sky and we bless it with Om Ahung, Om Ahung, Om Ahung. These three essential Sanskrit syllables that represent the enlightened body, speech and mind of all the holy beings. So we imagine it transforms it into this ocean of nectar. Now we just visualize, just imagine, use your creative imagination, offering it, all the Buddhas, all the Bodhisattvas, and all the suffering sentient beings, all the humans and the gods and the animals and the spirits and the hell beings. Imagine them all pervading space, and they're all experiencing the pleasure of receiving this. You're taking away all their pain and giving them everything they need. How marvelous, think. If I could do this, how fantastic. Lama Sangye Lama Che Dejin Lama Gerunte Kungi Jepo Lama